Now, on to one of our main stories of the day. The lawyer for the family of Leigh Matthews, who was kidnapped and killed in 2004, says her killer, Donovan Moodley, has been recommended for parole by the Parole Board. Moodley abducted Matthews from Bond University and held her captive and demanded ransom. He pleaded guilty the following year. However, Correctional Services says the process for offenders serving life must first be assessed by the Case Management Committee, followed by Correctional Services, Correctional Supervision and Parole Board. And then recommendations are referred to the National Council for Correctional Services before the Minister makes the final decision. We're now joined by Singabakho Nxumalo, the Correctional Services spokesperson. Singabakho, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to SA Today. I'm actually going through your statement that you've released, and you've confirmed in that statement that Donovan Moodley's parole recommendation still has several stages to go through. Can you perhaps walk us through each step of this process and the timelines involved so that we can understand how such decisions are made?
A very good afternoon, and thank you for having us. Perhaps it's important to firstly dissect it in this way. People who are sentenced to a determined period, meaning a number of years, are treated differently from people who are sentenced to life imprisonment. Life imprisonment, the process is much more rigorous and very long in the sense that your profile, after having served the minimum required time, will go to the Case Management Committee. Basically, they put it together, invite the offender to check if everything is there. Then that profile will go to the Correctional Supervision and Parole Board. They go through that. They make it a point that every detail that has been captured, indeed find expression. They may also even invite the offender as well. The victims of crime also do participate. This is what has happened with this particular case. It is unfortunate that the victims, family or lawyers have taken what was then discussed in that session and distributed publicly prematurely, because the process has to move from the Parole Board to the National Council for Correctional Services. That must also take time, make it a point that everything is there, and make it a point that indeed this person is ready for social integration before submitting that to the minister, who is the decision maker. So the process is far from being complete. Unfortunately, the information was dispatched to different people prematurely.
And speaking of social integration after release, I mean, the family of Leigh Matthews has been quite outspoken about their pain, and understandably so, and of course the opposition to Moodley's release. So how does the parole system then weigh the views of victims' families when considering parole for offenders serving life?
This particular case, Donovan Moodley, has been before the Parole Board on a number of occasions. This is not the first time, not the second, not the third. And in the entire structure, the victims have been invited to make representation. And one will indeed understand that the victims will say, no, we don't want this person to be recommended for parole placement, because they will feel that perhaps the sentence has not been served in its entirety. Some will even say the person must die in prison. But people ought to remember what is the mandate of correctional services. Our mandate is to correct offending behavior, rehabilitate a person, and prepare that person for life post-incarceration. But the views of the victims are not taken for granted, in that there is a hierarchy of other factors that gets to be looked at. You do not just take one and say it supersedes everything. Hence, we've got these different layers. So we must make it a point that all these phases, all these factors have been looked into, and then make a recommendation to the minister, who must then make a decision whether this person is fit to be placed out, even looking at the risk whether this person is likely to reoffend, or this person will be a risk to the society out there. So you look at a variety of factors, not just one, and then say, based on this particular statement by the victims, therefore, this is the way that we should go.
You've just taken us through some of the factors to be considered, but relating to the particular offender. But does the department consider the broader public interest and the potential outcry when making parole recommendations, or is the decision purely based on legal and rehabilitative criteria?
Factors that get to be looked into. One is to say what was contained in the sentence plan, correctional sentence plan. That's like a journey that is then designed for an offender after being assessed, which will then determine how that person is to be rehabilitated. And at the end of that, or once the person has served the minimum required time, then that must be tested. You look at a number of reports even from specialists who must then pronounce themselves. Hence, I've said, I'll go back to the fact that you look at a number of factors, not just one, and say, based on this, therefore, this person must be placed out. Yes, also consider the likelihood if whether this person continues to be of great danger to society. But if a person does meet the requirements to be placed out, you then have what is called parole conditions, in saying that what are measures that you can put in place, one, to assist this person once out there to say this person can comply, but also managing the risk that might still be there, so that if a person is unable to comply, you can then take that person back into custody.
We certainly hope that public safety is one of the primary considerations here. But great chatting to you, Singabakho. Thank you so much for joining us.